Do you like to eat? Gene and I have said that eating is one of our favorite hobbies or forms of entertainment, and maybe we ought to find something else like playing cards or doing water aerobics. We all have to eat, don't we? Every meal in which we take part has certain expectations built into it. If we grab something at the McDonald's drive-thru and we eat in the car, or if we take our sweetheart out to dinner at a fine restaurant, there are different expectations about those meals and the rules or guidelines that define the meal. If we're eating at home around the kitchen table or sitting on the couch before the television with a bowl of cereal, there are different expectations than if we have been invited to someone's house for dinner. From Luke's Gospel, read this morning, comes the ongoing story of Jesus at a dinner in the home of a Pharisee. To me, one of the amazing aspects of the Gospels is that the writers of the Gospels spend very little time telling us about Jesus. We really don't have that many details about the life and biography of Jesus. Remember, they skip right from the birth stories to his adulthood, but we rather have much more space in the Gospels dedicated to Jesus telling us about the kingdom of God. And he tells it through stories of himself and others. You know, we reveal much about ourselves through our stories. So Jesus uses the events of the ordinary day, the kind of days each of us have every day, to reveal and connect with eternal truths. Jesus, once more, sets a contrast between the assumed assumptions of the world, between the that's just the way things are and will always be understood ways of the world, and the kingdom of God as God intends for it to be. In the ordinary day of Jesus, dinner parties had a common context and unwritten and largely unspoken but understood rules. There were certain seats at the dinner party reserved for certain people based on your understood importance. It would be embarrassing as a guest in someone's home for dinner to take a seat of higher importance and have to be told that you need to move back. It was far better to take the seats of lesser importance and be invited to move forward. One time while we were traveling on a flight, Gene and I were given seats in two different sections of the plane. I promise I did not ask for that, okay? And we did not ask, but we were graciously offered by a very nice lady the chance for me to switch seats so that Gene and I could sit together. Now, had we gone up to the very front of the plane, you know, the front of the plane where the seats are much wider and cushier, and the snack is much better. If we had gone up there and asked to switch seats, asked somebody sitting up there, could we come up here and sit, you take our seats back there, I'm sure the answer would have been, excuse me, are you crazy? For you see, we were not first-class people when we were flying on that plane. We were whatever they call the common folk back then. The economy class, that's right. And we understood our place on that plane. But Jesus models and teaches us that in the life of the kingdom of God, humility is a cherished quality. But beyond this rather rational and acceptable suggestion, Jesus goes a step further, and he challenges the rules of how the dinner party guest list is completed. Did you hear them? Then he turned to the host and he said, the next time you put on a dinner, don't just invite your friends and your family and your rich neighbors, the kind of people who can return the favor, but invite some people who never get invited out. The misfits from the wrong side of the tracks. And you'll experience a blessing, he says. Now, they won't necessarily be able to return the favor, but the favor will be returned. Believe me, oh, how it will be returned at the resurrection of God's people. 3 years ago, when we were just in the planning stages of the ministry hoping to happen here, Jean and I had opportunity to travel to Denver, Colorado, where she grew up. The United Methodist Church sent me there to a conference about starting a new church. And on our first day in Denver, our first meal there, it was lunch. It was in a context unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. We asked the young man at the front door of the hotel where we were staying if he could recommend a good place for lunch in Inglewood, a suburb of Denver, where we were headed to see the houses that Jean had grown up in as a child. Well, the young man thought for a moment, and he said, well, try Cafe 180. I really like it. Well, he gave us directions, and we found our way there. It was a small but very attractive lunch spot in a building that shared its space with a Starbucks. We were greeted at the counter by a friendly woman who handed us a printed menu, and I noticed that among the selections of salads and wraps and sandwiches and beverages, there were no prices listed. Well, that's usually not a good sign. So I asked, how much are your items? And she said, oh, whatever you would like to pay. Well, seeing my puzzled look, she said, is this your first time here? And I said, yes. And she said, well, this is how it works. You pay us for lunch whatever you would like or can. If you want to give us what you would normally spend on lunch, well, that's great. If you would like to give us a little more than that, or a little less, well, that's great too. Or if you would rather give us an hour of volunteer work as payment for your lunch, well, that works as well. Well, sure enough, some of the folks who came in the restaurant picked up a broom or an apron and they began to sweep, or they began to wash dishes or refill the ice machine. Turns out the restaurant is a nonprofit organization that has found a way to help feed folks whose resources are limited in a way that promotes dignity and does not separate folks from one another, separate those who can pay out of their pocket and those who cannot. What a creative and loving and cool idea, huh? It's probably one of the best ideas I brought home from the conference. And I'm still looking down the street. Is there a space somewhere for that kind of restaurant? And it all came just as a suggestion from a hotel doorman. It was a meal whose rules were far different from that which we were expecting. You know, every meal has expectations around it. Our meals here do. And let me just say a word about our Sunday after services meal. Unlike other meals provided here throughout the week, on Sunday following the service, we really would like the meal to be a family dinner. A worshiping family dinner. A meal for building relationships. That's why we encourage everyone who comes to worship to stay for the meal. Now, I know sometimes folks have plans to go out or family to have dinner with, but stay once in a while with us and share the meal. That's also why we encourage everyone who comes not only to worship to stay, but that's why we encourage folks to come to worship and then stay for the meal. See, this meal that we have on Sundays, I see it sort of different from being a meal just for folks who may not have access to food, such as what a soup kitchen provides. And that's a great ministry too. So an expectation we have built around this Sunday meal is that the folks who share the meal with us participate in worship prior to the meal. Now, we borrowed this idea. We didn't come up with that on our own. We borrowed it from our sister church, Triune Mercy Center in Greenville. Now, we make exceptions to that. If somebody shows up for the first time just at lunchtime and they didn't know about coming to worship or what time we worship, well, we say, join us for today, and next Sunday come to worship first, and it'll be even better. You say, through that expectation, I think what we're saying is that worship means so much, and you mean so much, that we want you to be a part of our worship.
Amen.
We're not being mean. Just expectations, okay? One of the best known and perhaps most important meals that was ever shared was between Jesus and his friends just hours before his arrest and execution. This meal was sort of hastily planned. It was in one sense a private dinner, not open just to everybody. It was shared, as I said, with his closest friends. Among them that day was even a friend who would betray him. The expectations surrounding that meal and the meaning and definition given to that meal have forever changed the world and forever changed your life. You may not know it, but it has. Changed your life and my life. You see, in the scriptures, we learn of some of the details of the meal, like who was at the meal and where the meal took place, a room they had to borrow. But it's what happened after dinner, after all of the food had been served, that left an eternal imprint on the world and on us. You see, after the dinner, the scripture story says that Jesus took a normal loaf of bread and he broke the bread and he said to his friends, take the bread and eat of this bread. It is my body, which is broken for you. Broken for me. His disciples were confused. What's he mean? And then he raised up a cup of wine and he said, this cup is my blood. The blood of a new agreement, a new covenant that has been poured out for you and for many. What's that about? And then Jesus said, whenever you eat bread, which for the folks that he was speaking to, bread was a staple of their diet every day. Maybe ours too. And he said, whenever you eat bread and whenever you drink from the cup, from now on, remember me. Reflect upon my life. Reflect upon what I have said and what I have done. And so, over the ages, people have gathered to break bread and to raise a cup and remember Jesus, to take in Jesus, his words, his life, his death, and his resurrection. To take it all into our hearts. Now, you know, I've completed my Master of Divinity many years ago, so I'm done educated, okay? But I cannot begin to fully explain the mystery of this meal. All I know is that in the death of Jesus, my sins have been forgiven. Amen. And so have yours. And in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, my death will not be my end, nor will yours be an end. For our relationship with God goes on forever and ever. All I know is that it is love that has made that all happen. Not anything I've done or ever will do. It's love that has made it happen. That's the details of this dinner, to which now you are invited. Let's pray. Come now into our hearts, Lord Jesus, through the breaking of this bread and the sharing of this cup is our